All right, here we go. So this is the Shrink Shop Depth Sessions. I'm Mike Boyle, and this is where we go more in depth into topics that you can learn and use to take your game of life to the next level. And so we have our Shrink Shop 5 Alive sessions and some of the live clips and something like that. They're a little bit shorter and they're meant to be more convenient. This one we're going to go in a little bit more depth. We're going to be here for 30 minutes. We are on a number of different pages right now, and thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for, if you like these things, if they're good for you, it's really beneficial for everybody for you to press the share button as we're watching. And then that way it kind of gets out and about there a little bit more. Today we're going to be talking about addiction, but I think I'm going to put a different slant on it than maybe you've ever thought of before. And so that's my challenge to myself and my sales pitch to you is that you're gonna think about addiction in a different way than you ever had before. So I have asked a question for today, the poll. Anyone experience addiction or know someone that struggles with addiction in their life? And kind of actually the reason why I'm actually asking the poll is to really just show us that it's pretty much unanimous, 100%. Everybody has touched this or been touched by it. So this might be a good thing to share if it's not totally relevant to you. However, about halfway through this talk, we're going to make it relevant to everyone, not just substance abuse or drug or alcohol addiction, but it also might be particularly relevant to someone that is going through the recovery process, because we're going to start by talking about the recovery stages in the addiction process. Okay, so the brain in the body is really, really good at establishing homeostasis, at establishing a status quo. So, what do I mean by that? Like, we're really adaptable, we're really flexible, and we will make whatever we have to. Human beings can make a lot of things normal, right? So if we are consistently putting certain inputs and putting our body in certain situations and putting substances like alcohol or drugs or cigarettes or caffeine or sugar or whatever it is into our body on a regular basis, then our body is going to adjust to that input, and it is going to change the way it makes things, processes things, deals with things, such that we become accustomed to that new normal. We become accustomed to, so say for example, in the case of an intense drug like cocaine, right? There's a lots of things going on when someone does cocaine, right? And we talk about a lot in these sessions how when we talk about the brain, we're using general oversimplification. So I know that there's more going on than just this one thing, but in this case, we're going to talk about dopamine. And dopamine is responsible for pleasure and motivation. And when we do a drug like cocaine, we get tons of dopamine, right? And so when we get all this dopamine, basically the brain says, cool, I don't need to make dopamine because they're giving me dopamine with all the cocaine. And so it'll stop making the dopamine. But it will also make an adjustment to say like, wow, they're giving me like my owner here. The body and the brain is saying my owner, which is you, the conscious being making conscious choices, is giving. There's the body is going, the brain is giving me 10,000 times the normal quantity of dopamine. So two things happen. One, I don't need to make dopamine anymore. But two, I need to adjust other things to make that seem relatively normal. Of course, obviously with addiction, people's lives get pretty chaotic pretty quickly. But for the most part, there's an effort in the body to make it normal and to make it like equilibrium and to make it balanced. And so the body develops like a set point. It develops like this is my body and brain on drugs, right? Harken back to the old commercials that maybe some of you older folks with me here remember. This is your brain on drugs and the egg cracking. Well, I'm not going there, but your brain and your body on drugs will create this kind of new chemistry, right? And it'll say, okay, this is now what we expect to have on a day in and day out basis, Okay. So again, remember, if this is vibing with you, share it. Share it with people, especially with people that are maybe going through the addiction process, or people have been through the addiction process and have fallen off the wagon and have struggled with it, because I'm going to really share some interesting details and information that make you go, "Oh, that's why. That's what happened." Okay? So, so you have your baseline, what I'm going to call your baseline. This is your brain and your body chemistry on the drug, okay? And then what someone does when they go and try to get off the drug is then they stop taking the drug. Now they're no longer getting the 10,000x. They're no longer getting that incredible amount of dopamine. And so they have the baseline on the drug. The body is adjusting, trying to make this normal. And then they take it away and boom, the baseline drops. And now their body is no longer producing dopamine, which is responsible for motivation and for happiness, etc., for pleasure, of course, along with many other things, but we're just using dopamine as an example today. And so then, boom, the baseline drops out, and the body is like, whoa, what the heck happened? And it reels, and it takes time before it recovers and starts making a new baseline. In that period, we call withdrawal. Everyone's heard of that, right? So withdrawal, you feel really awful, you feel really crappy, and there's some motivations there for why do people go through withdrawal? Why do people relapse when they go through withdrawal? Well, of course, because they feel awful and they don't want to feel that awful anymore. So now they don't wait until the body creates a new normal with the chemicals. Instead, they put the old chemicals back in there so that they put the old chemicals back in there so that they can feel even again, right? So that they can feel even again. But here's the thing. In the withdrawal period, we feel awful, right? Everyone knows that. But that feeling awful is your brain recovering, is your nervous system and your chemistry recovering and trying to create a new normal. And your body will kick in resources to establish a new baseline if you give it the time. And so depending on what you've been using, how long you've been using it, how strong you are, how old you are, how much you weigh, all these factors. But for some useful intents and purposes, that period lasts from anywhere from, 0, 1 to 14 days, right? So then at 14 days, we actually have a situation, and this is really unique information. We actually have a situation where now no longer is the body in withdrawal. Actually, what it does is it was down here and it kicks into overdrive and it says, whoa, it finally becomes convinced they're not going to give me that dopamine anymore. I better start making dopamine. And so it kicks into overdrive and starts making dopamine in excess quantities. And so what happens is we had a baseline on drugs, we had withdrawal, and then the body kicks into overdrive and starts making extra chemicals. And it starts overcompensating for the loss and starts going into overdrive. And then so you might actually, so this is where people feel like, and this stage is called the honeymoon stage, because people feel like I I feel good. I feel pretty good actually, I feel great. And this might happen earlier, might happen later, but it happens at some point in the recovery process. And I'm going to make connections later to just the habit formation process. It's not just about substance abuse. There's that point where we're excited, we have a bunch of dopamine, we're motivated, and we feel we have like the rush of the new changes, right? And our body is making extra feel good chemicals. But it's not the end of the story. People will actually relapse. They will go back to using drugs and alcohol, or they will go back to their old ways of being, even when they're feeling good in the honeymoon stage. Why is that? Well, because they say things to themselves like, I got this. I don't have a problem really. I feel pretty good. I could easily just have one drink, or I could easily just have one line, or just one cigarette, or I could easily go back to that, toxic addictive relationship, or the tub of ice cream or whatever. I could just have a scoop. It doesn't need to turn into, the whole pint, right? All these rationalizations, because the rationalizations are coming from actually an extra amount of confidence as a result of the body making new chemicals in overdrive to try to compensate for the withdrawal. So the thing is when you are equipped with this information, you can hear this rationale and say, "Oh, I better use this extra energy and motivation to establish new routines, new habits, going to the gym, well, maybe not in COVID times, but exercising and eating well and getting rest and spending time in nature and whatever, going to a meeting, whatever it is, because it's not going to last. Now, this period, if you're in classic drug recovery, this honeymoon period is said to last from about 15 days to about 45 days, where you can actually feel pretty good, pretty darn good, and have some extra happy chemicals, some extra confidence chemicals. But at about 45 days, so now get back to our visual baseline on drugs, withdrawal, honeymoon. But now the body's like, oh, I need to have a new baseline. So around day 45, give or take, with all these different factors included, the brain is going to go, I can't keep up this overdrive pace. I need to find a new baseline. So it's going to drop and it's going to rise and it's going to drop and it's going to rise. It's going to drop and it's going to rise in an effort to find a new normal, a new baseline. And this period can be really frustrating for people because they're like, I've been going to AA meetings, I've been going to the gym, I've been doing everything right. And what the heck? All of a sudden I feel like crap. And then they say, you know what? F it. If I'm going to feel like crap, why do all this stuff? Why not just drink? If I'm going to feel like crap anyhow, why not just use? Right? They're not going to, so they're going to think actually the recovery process is not working. But it is working. This is just how the brain adjusts. In this period where in some circles it's called hitting the wall, because it feels like, wow, I was feeling great, and then boom, all of a sudden out of nowhere I feel crappy one day, almost like withdrawal. I feel good the next day. I feel crappy. I feel good. I feel crappy. And it's kind of like, it can be like crazy making, and it can be a little bit discouraging, right? So that period can last anywhere from 45 to 120 days. And so that's 4 months, right? It's about a month and a half to 4 months. And so many people will relapse. They'll get through, here's the thing. Look at your classic drug recovery program. It's 30 days long. They leave while they're still in the honeymoon period, and they don't even hit the wall. Then they go out into their normal environments. They have work, they have family, they have stresses, and then they hit the wall, and then they're like, this doesn't work. I'm going to therapy, I'm exercising, I'm eating well. This is a drag. I feel like crap again. I might as well use. But if people know that it's actually not that the recovery process isn't working, it's that it's working. It's that this is what it takes for their brain to recover and make a new normal. That new normal isn't coming for about 120 days of sobriety. And so after that 4 month period, about 120 days, then the brain goes into what is called the adjustment phase, where it's mostly predictable. It's no longer doing this, and now it's a little bit more reliable. It doesn't mean that all the problems are gone in your life, right? But now at least your chemistry is a little bit more reliable, and that can last upwards, but you're still healing, and that can last upwards to 2 years, depending on what drugs or alcohol have been used, how long they've been used, etc. That adjustment phase can last up to 2 years before your brain is like absolutely healed from substance abuse, right? So that can be daunting to hear, right? But it's also, but I think it's better to have real information than to have fantasies, right? It's better to have real information and say, whoa, man, I actually made some choices here, and some of them aren't my fault, and some of them are about trauma, and some of them, I get all that, but I made some choices in my life here that led me to really hurt my brain, that it's going to take a couple years for it to feel better, right? And not only that, a couple years of sobriety for it to feel together, and with these ups and downs and these predictable stages in between. Now, it gets better and better, it gets easier and easier, but particularly in these first 4 months, you have baseline on drugs, you have withdrawal, you have honeymoon, and then you have the wall. So there's lots of different changes going on, and if someone knows this, they can ride those changes a little bit and not overreact to them and not believe the stories that their brain is telling themselves about why, the recovery program doesn't work. This sucks. I feel like crap. I might as well quit. I might as well just use all these things. And then they say, actually, no, this is a normal part of my brain's healing and recovery, and I need to stick with it to get to the point where I'm at that adjustment phase about 120 days in, where I can feel a little bit more predictably stable. Okay? So that's the skinny. But here's the deal. This is not just relevant to substance abuse. It's not just relevant to uh, it's also relevant for emotions, and here's the reason why. Okay? Every single time we think with this top part of the brain, this is our 3 part of the brain model. If you've been watching these classes, this is a familiar model to you. But you have the thinking part of the brain up here, and you have the feeling and the instinctual part of the brain down here. Every time you think a thought, it inspires feeling. Feelings are chemistry, actually. Emotions are chemistry. They're not disembodied things. They're not ephemeral things. Like if you have an emotion, if you have fear, that's adrenaline, it's heart rate, it's, it's organ activity, it's breathing patterns, it's muscle tone, it's blood chemistry. It's a very much a chemical thing. So when we think, we create chemistry. Those chemistries we call emotions. Now, once I think a thought and I create chemicals, and then those chemicals now send a message up to the thinking part of the brain and get me to think the way I feel. And then I feel the way I think. And then I think the way I feel. And then I feel the way I think. And this loop of thinking a thought, producing chemicals that are equal to that thought. I think a thought, I think a fear thought, and I produce chemicals that say that make me feel the fear. And then when I feel the fear, it enforces me to think more fear thoughts. And when I think more fear thoughts, it creates more fear chemicals. More fear chemicals produce more fear, more impulse to think more fear thoughts, and on and on and on we go. And this loop generates incredible intensity and addiction. We actually become addicted to our emotions this way. And here's the thing. Just because this thinking feeling loop creates intensity does not mean it's necessarily true or real. You could think a fear thought about something that will never happen, feel the fear, and then think more fear thoughts, and then feel more fear, and we say, it must be so because I feel it so intensely. It must be real. It must be my intuition. It must be, it's going to happen. And this is, and so this is a really tricky wicket because we're taught to trust our instincts, to trust our gut. Well, guess what? Actually, the brain lies to us all the time, right? And so it's not until we actually settle down those those survival-based chemicals, and we actually get ourselves into a state of clarity, openness, and relaxation and open-heartedness, that's when intuition can be relied on. But if we are in fight, flight, or freeze, the brain is going to interpret everything as dangerous. It's going to interpret everything as a reason to be angry, afraid, or depressed. And so the brain in survival mode, as we've talked about in past sessions here, is effed. It will interpret the world through the lens of survival, and it will see reasons to think that the world is a dangerous place or an angry place, a place to judge or a place to be depressed about. And it'll feel what it thinks, and then it'll think what it feels and feel what it thinks. And that intensity loop, because this is chemistry, actually becomes a new addiction. And here's the tricky part. How many times have you done a New Year's resolution and it hasn't worked? How many times have you tried to improve your life and things are going good for a little while, and then boom, you get blindsided, or you self-sabotage, or right? Well, that's actually because your brain gets addicted to your emotional state. You get addicted to the chemistry. So say it's anger. Say you've been just bitter and angry for 20 years. Well, the chemistry involved in that is like your baseline on drugs. That's your baseline on anger. You go to take away the anger, and in your attempts to meditate or exercise or be happy or turn over a new leaf or think positive, and your body goes into withdrawal. It might be a little bit quicker, because it's not quite the same as a physical as 10,000x quantity of cocaine or something like that, but it goes through the same pattern. Then you might even have a little honeymoon period. I'm going to do it. I set my New Year's resolution. I'm going to stick to it. I got my to-do list. I got my new water bottle. You know, I told my friends, so I'm accountable, all these things. But then you hit the wall. So you have the honeymoon period, but then you hit the wall where the body's like, dude, where's my anger chemicals? I'm used to feeling angry. I adjusted all of my neurology, all of my biology, all of my chemistry to have anger feel normal, to have anger feel safe, actually. Because the body associates what you have already survived as safe. This is such a key principle. If you are alive today, right here in this moment, according to the survival part of your brain, anything that has already happened is safe because you've survived it. You're here. Anything that is in the future that is unknown is, by definition, dangerous because your body doesn't know if it can survive happiness. Now, you, as a conscious being, might decide that you want to be happy, or you want to live a life that's less dramatic or less toxic or whatever. You might long for these things, but your survival brain, your instinctual brain down here beneath your which is subconscious, beneath your rational thought, is going, I don't know what that's all about. I don't know what happy chemicals are. I'm used to these anger chemicals. I'm used to these depression chemicals. I'm used to these anxiety chemicals. I'm used to these trauma chemicals. I'm used to these chaos chemicals. So what it does is when you go to try to make change and you're in the honeymoon period or whatever, that actually trips your alarm switch and has your brain go, missing anger chemicals, missing depression chemicals, and it sounds the alarm, and the alarm sends a message right up the brainstem, and the thinking part of the brain interprets that alarm and says something must be wrong. And then we start thinking in old ways, old familiar ways. We start that inspire us to act in old familiar ways, that inspire us to create old familiar chemicals, so that the brain goes back to baseline on the emotional addiction, baseline on the drug of our own past habits and reactions. So to know this, to know that real change, real octaving to a new level of being, to become truly healthy and happy when we have a pattern of being depressed, angry, anxious, traumatized, whatever, chaotic, addicted, whatever you want to say, will require understanding that your brain, on a chemical level, is very accustomed to the chemistry of your past, and it will try to trick you into thinking, feeling, and acting in the old ways in order to get its chemical needs met. And the very fact that you are trying to change can be interpreted by your base survival part of the brain as a threat. And so real change then requires kind of understanding this and kind of being like a ninja, a change ninja, to sneak around the alarm system and to make changes in ways that do not trip the wire of this alarm system to get us to self-sabotage ourselves. Okay? So that's kind of got to be the subject for another talk, in terms of like, well, how do we become the change ninja? And that's a subject for a lot of the talks that I'm doing. So please check out the YouTube channel, check out the Facebook page, share it, like it, all that stuff, so that you get the notifications, because I'm regularly talking about, well, how do you become that kind of change ninja? But this is the basis to understand that just because you go to try to make a positive change in your life, then all of a sudden you find yourself thinking and feeling and acting in old familiar ways, it doesn't mean that's real. It doesn't mean that but you feel it very intensely. You're going to come up against all of the quote unquote demons as to why you used to think, feel, and act that way. They are going to come up and try to get you to live your life through the lens of the past instead of through the future that you're trying to create. And you have to know that that's part of the game, and you have to be ready to kind of be skillful when that happens and not really believe everything that you think and feel. And this is a really interesting concept here. But this a really important sign of psychological and spiritual maturity is actually to not believe everything you think and feel. Just because you think and feel it, even with intensity, does not mean it's real. And the only litmus test that you need to apply to it is, does it work? If I continue to think and feel this way, will it produce the results that I want? Will it create the future that I'm trying to create? And if not, you are at liberty to let go of those ways of thinking and feeling and to cultivate new ones. No one says you have to believe everything that you think and feel. In fact, you can choose to focus on only allowing yourself to act on the thoughts and feelings that are in line with your integrity and values and the future changes, positive self that you're trying to create. All right? So, um, that's it in a nutshell. A great book to support that process, which you could probably get from the title compared to what I'm reading here, is by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it's called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. It will explain all of this in incredible detail with some practical methods to boot. So that's one resource for you. Another resource is to keep tuning in and to keep liking and sharing these videos and to keep asking questions. Like I always say, you're welcome to put in your questions. You're welcome to send messages. You're welcome to so that way these teachings and these in-depth lessons can be in line with your specific goals and your specific questions and your specific objections, and that'd be really great. I'd love to have that feedback. So please do. And again, this is Mike Boyle. This is the Shrink Shop Depth Session, where we go 30 minutes in depth to teach you things that can help you really take your game of life to the next level. And I look forward to the next one and love you all. Have a great day.